Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025. Update for Friday the 1st. All right, let's go. Well, as far as official setups, let's stick with these two for now. Obviously, I reevaluate this daily and consider other ones too. But for now, let's stick with those two. Not a bad day overall in the portfolio. We now have 4 out of 6 that have hit the IPT. And as I was saying earlier in the weekly charts, that's really the secret is banging out that IPT. And then, of course, then obviously occasionally hitting the a big home run. But this is not bad when you have 4 out of 6. You know what I mean? I love 6 out of 6, but 4 out of 6, not that bad. Anyway, OUST as far as official setups, obviously wait for an entry on that one and on anything you might be considering. Obviously, SDLP still looks like it has potential too. And again, wait for an entry on that one. Let's take a look at the portfolio, and then we'll pop out, obviously, the overall market and drill down a little bit. BTM, kind of Flatsville. You know me, I sure like to see it take off and not look back for a while. But it is kind of hanging in there and finding some support. KGC, not a bad day. Up a little bit more than a half of a point. And we're not too far away from all-time highs. And we have earnings behind us. So that's obviously a good thing. Katos up a little in here, better than poking the eye, not too far from all-time highs. TFPM, a bit of a disappointment. Looks like it's finding a little support at its prior lows. Longer term, still an uptrend, obviously. You never retain all your stops just in case. TGen banging out that IPT with a little bit of vigor. Not a bad day there. Go ahead and bump your stop to break even, and we'll see how long we can hang on. Ride that bucket bronco, as Bill Dunn would say. That's what he said about trend following. It's like riding a bucking bronco. Sometimes it's like riding an effing bronco. But anyway, I digress. Flatsville and VG kind of hanging in there. It looks really good longer term, but hanging in there and not too impressive shorter term, obviously. So I your stops just in case. You know the routine. Let's take a look at the market and drill down. First of all, obviously S&P 500. S&P 500 outside day down, looking kind of ugly there. Was off to the races, came back in. I'd rather the market start weak and finish strong as opposed to that, obviously. But so far, the nice breakout remains intact. The market could use a bit of a correction, so I wouldn't get too excited about that. Nasdaq Composite actually only closed down a smidge on the day, but a big fat opening gap reversal there too. Rusty 2000, as you would imagine, getting hit. It got hit a little harder, down about 1% on the day. This action so far has it stalling at this overhead supply. I sure would like to see this thing obviously get through this overhead supply and not look back. I know you're probably sick of me saying that. Software, opening gap reversal. It's not that far away from its prior breakout. So again, you know me, I like to see these things clear the prior breakouts and not look back for a while. Obviously, we've been focusing on the long side lately and not talking much about weakness because we're not shorting in this environment. But there is some weakness out there. Healthcare provider specifically banging on new lows with a bit of vigor. Medical devices, although in the Landry 100, I do have several of these medical device stocks, but you can see overall beginning to break down a little bit. So in general, unless you have the mother of all setups, you want to avoid those areas. Pharmaceuticals also breaking down. This is major drugs with a little bit of vigor, so that's fairly ugly. But as you know, we've been focusing mostly or exclusively on the long side. That's why you hadn't heard a lot about those particular setups or the downside that much. Speed of downside, EFA shares have now come all the way back in, well below their prior breakout levels and all the way back into the near the bottom of this recent basin here. So that's an area that should be avoided for now at least. Let's take a look at semiconductors. Semiconductors got whacked a bit. This action pulls them back a little bit toward their recent peak. I wouldn't get too excited just yet. So far, nice uptrend remains intact. So far, the breakout remains intact. But in a case like this, when you really haven't gotten that far away from the prior peak, you really like to see it go for a while before looking back. But longer term still looks okay. Metals overall actually recovered off their worst levels, and they were down a little bit less than 0.5%. But they look pretty good still. Uranium pulling back so far, so that still looks like it has potential. Silver getting whacked fairly hard in here, so you might want to avoid silver for now unless you really like the setup, unless you have a deep pullback in something that's very in a very strong uptrend. Take a look at the dollar. Continues to hit new highs. It's a little less vigor, but new highs nonetheless. Obviously, that's putting pressure on selected commodities or certain commodities, such as gold, dollar-denominated commodities. It also it's putting pressure on the foreign forex. Gold, the commodity, down a little after an opening gap there, but it did end up on the day. And the bottom of its base so far has held. Let's take a look at gold stocks. Gold stocks ended down a little. So far, or lately, they've been stuck in a little bit of a range. Let's take a look at biotech, and we'll wrap things up here in just a second. Outside day down, kind of an ugly day for biotech. Again, it's stalling at this overhead supply. On an individual basis, there are some stocks that still look pretty good in spite of it looking kind of questionable overall. And finally, defense coming back in a little bit, but it's been on a tear as of late. It could actually use a bit of a correction. That still looks pretty darn good. I think that's pretty much it for tonight. Kind of an ugly day, but thank goodness we had a good day, and it's always good when that happens. If it doesn't feel as ugly when you have a good day, right? Anyway, everybody have a fantastic night. If you have any questions, you know the routine. Thank you so much.